If you are lost in college recruiting, then I'm going to tell you why you're lost. And then also, I'm going to give you a game plan that you can just follow to a T. And if you do that, it's going to put you in a better position than you're in right now. If you don't know who I am, my name is Jack Kruger. I went to 2 different Division I schools. I've been through the recruiting process. I played 7 years of professional sports. I've sent tens of thousands of emails to college coaches, and I've helped hundreds of athletes navigate through college recruiting. So everything I'm going to tell you in this video is learned from the front lines on the battlefield, okay? So if you are lost in college recruiting, there's a couple reasons why that could be the case, right? The first is that it might just be your first kid who is in the recruiting process. Like you've never been through this before, and you're just now getting your bearings and figuring out what even is the recruiting process? What does that mean? Like, how do we actually make this happen, right? It could also be that you yourself went through the recruiting process. You were an athlete. You might have played in college, but that was like 30 or 40 years ago. And so now you're like, listen, the process is very different now than it was when I went through it. And so I'm not entirely sure what we're supposed to be doing now because it was just a different world, right? And then it could also be that you are getting information from a lot of other different sources, and that information is conflicting, right? You might have one person that's a friend, right, that says, hey, you know what, you should definitely send emails to college coaches. Like, that's how we made it happen for our family. You should do the same, right? And then you go talk to another person, and they're like, hey, no, emails don't work. Coaches don't read emails. Instead, you should be posting on social media. Like, that's what you should be doing. And then you might talk to another family who's like, listen, neither of those things work. You should be going to recruiting events. And then someone else will say, you need to go hire an advisor. And like, there's a whole bunch of different schools of thought out there. And a lot of this that you're getting, you're probably getting from social media, which is ironic because I am also telling you this right now on social media. This is going to go on YouTube. And so I understand the irony there. But the reality is that a lot of the people that are saying things about college recruiting on social media don't know what they're talking about, okay? Like 95% of the information that's out there about college recruiting on social media is trash. Like, it's not good advice. And so what's happening right now is, if that's you, if you've been following a bunch of different people in recruiting on social media, you are probably pulling bits and pieces of information from each of those people. You're like, ooh, I kind of like this from this guy, and I like this from this guy, and this from this girl, and this from here, right? And so you've sort of concocted this random, conglomeration, this bit from all these different sources, and now this is your own unique strategy in recruiting, okay? And I will be the first to tell you that that is a road and a highway to absolutely nowhere, okay? You cannot get pulled in multiple different directions and expect to get to where you want to go. From a very just logical standpoint, you can't do that, right? We need a singular game plan that actually puts you in a good position in recruiting, rather than trying to figure out who is telling the truth, who's not telling the truth, who knows what they're talking about, who's full of it. Like, it's challenging. So I am going to tell you exactly what to do if you are lost in college recruiting, okay? Now, if you are already talking to some schools, right, or you're already down the road, this isn't for you. Like, keep doing your thing. But if you are lost and you're overwhelmed and you're like, listen, I just need a game plan because I don't have one, then do exactly what I'm about to tell you to do, okay? The first thing that you have to do is you have to gather as much evidence as you possibly can that your kid is a good player. Because the reality is, if your kid does not have talent, there's no amount of exposure or effort or marketing that will solve that problem. Fair? Okay, so let's assume that your kid does have talent, because my guess is that you're not watching this video right now because your kid is getting crushed on the field, like wherever they are, or the court, or the pool, or whatever it is. You're watching this video because you're like, my kid is pretty good. Like, oh my gosh, it looks like they could play in college, or they really want to, or we're being told that they could, right? That's probably why you're here watching this video right now. Cool. So if that's the case, then they probably have talent. And now what we need is evidence of that talent. No college coach is just going to believe you if you say, my kid is good enough to play at your school. No one's going to believe you because you're the parent. You are about as biased as it gets, right? Okay, so we need proof that your kid is actually a good player. There are 3 primary forms of proof. There's sort of an alternate fourth, okay? The first form is video. The second form is stats. The third form is in-person evaluation. And the fourth form, which is sort of the alternate, would be like a coach recommendation. I say it's an alternate because it can be a little wish-washy depending on the credibility of your coach. If it's someone that's very trusted, then that recommendation can mean a lot. If it's someone who's not, it's worth nothing. So the three primary ones are video, stats, and in-person evaluation, okay? You are going to, for the sake of this video, because we're talking about you being lost in recruiting and it's the very beginning of the process, you are going to focus on the first two, which is video and stats, okay? Now, which one you should spend more time focused on depends on the sport that your kid plays. If your kid plays a skill-based sport, then you will want to focus on video. If your kid plays a time-based sport, then you will want to focus on stats. Here's what a skill-based sport versus time-based sport is and looks like. If your kid plays football, baseball, basketball, soccer, lacrosse, those are all skill-based sports. It's not a stat-driven sport, where a time-driven sport would be something like track and field or swimming, right? When those coaches, track and field coaches, swimming coaches, are recruiting players, they literally just look at times. They're like, which kid is the fastest enough? Is the fastest. And then they go with that kid, right? That's primarily what they do. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't have video or that coaches won't want to see video. They might still want to see video of those athletes, but it's primarily going to be stat driven. If you play a skill-based sport, there is a lot more subjectivity in those evaluations, which is why video is absolutely critical. Because college coaches want to see with their eyes what a kid is actually capable of. Those stats will not mean as much in skill-based sports because they require context to be valuable. For instance, if you have this unbelievable stat, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, this is just an incredible stat. It shows that my kid is a good player. If you live in South Dakota, where there's very little competition, right? And like the bar is so much lower there to be good, then that stat doesn't mean that much, right? Because you're playing against horrible competition. So that stat doesn't mean anything. Whereas if you were playing in a hotbed for your sport and you were playing against really strong competition and you had, a good stat, then that means a lot more. And there are a lot of other little factors, like external factors in stats that make something actually valuable. And for you to understand like which ones are and which ones aren't and how does that work, like it's probably too much for you if you're already finding yourself lost in college recruiting. Don't worry about that. For now, just focus on video, okay? So your goal is to go get as much video as you possibly can of your kid doing the stuff that they are supposed to do in their sport for their position. If you play a time-based sport, go get all the times that you possibly can, okay? So that's the first thing you need to do. In terms of how much, I recommend a minimum of 20 individual clips, okay? So like one play might be 10, 15, 20 seconds. That would be one clip. I recommend a minimum of 20 of those. Ideally, you have over 50, and the athletes that we work with that have the most amount of interest typically have 100 plus, okay? So you're shooting for a bare minimum of 20, 50 is great, 100 plus is the best, okay? So go get that video and put it up somewhere public. It cannot be sitting on your phone. You're not gonna send the file attachment whenever you contact college coaches. No. This needs to be public. Easiest way to do that is put it on YouTube. Okay? Because then you can put it on YouTube, you make it public, super easy for you to do. YouTube is not complicated, easy for the coach to navigate. Everybody knows how to use YouTube. And then you can just share the URL to those videos or to whatever it is that you want to send to. Okay? So take video, throw it on YouTube, and you've just accomplished step number 1. Step number 2, build a target list of 100 schools. Okay? That is step number 2. Now, you might be saying, Jack, 100. Are we being serious here? Yes, I am dead serious. It should be 100 schools. Now, I know that your kid is not interested in 100 schools. I'm not naive. I know they're 16 and they want to go to the top 5 schools in the country. Like, I know, okay? And I also know that you probably have criteria that you still want to filter schools by. You're like, hey, listen, Jack, but my kid has a 4.2 GPA. Like, we want to go to strong academic schools. We don't necessarily mind if it's like a D3 school, but we still want to go to good academic schools. Great. I promise you that you can find 100 strong academic schools in the United States. Like, I promise you, okay? I know because we do it on a daily basis. So you are looking for 100 schools. This number is critical for a number of reasons, okay? The first reason that it's critical is because you want math on your side, okay? Let me show you what I mean. If you contact 10 schools, I'm gonna say 10 because it's an easy number, okay? Because percentages make it really easy. If you go contact 10 schools, 8 out of the 10 will open your email. That's an 80% open rate. That's high, okay? A lot of people are gonna get less than that. Some will get more than that, but let's say roughly 80%. So 8 out of the 10 will open your email. Of those 8, 6 out of the 8 will need your kid's position in grad class. So we started at 10, we moved to 8 who opened it. Now we're at 6 who will need your position in grad class. That number will vary based on how early or late you are in the process. The earlier you are in the process, the higher that number will be. It might be 8 out of 8. The later you are in the process, it might be lower. It might be 4 out of 8. But for now, let's say roughly 75%, which would mean that 6 out of the 8 schools that open your email will need your position in grad class. So we started at 10, we're at 6 now. Of those 6, 4 out of the 6 will click on and watch your video in the email, okay? That's a 60% click-through rate, very high, okay? I'm being extremely generous here. That would be very high, okay? Most are gonna have significantly lower than that. But that means that 4 out of 6 will click on and watch your video. And then of those 4, roughly 1 out of the 4 will think that your kid is good enough and respond. Now, obviously, that number is completely dependent upon how good your kid is, the levels of schools that you're contacting. Like, there are lots of factors that go into that. If your kid's really good, you might get 3 out of 4. If they're not good or they're contacting schools they're not capable of playing at, it might be 0 out of 4, right? But let's say that it's 1 out of 4. So we started at 10. We moved to 8 who opened, 6 who needed your position in grad class, 4 who clicked on your video, and then 1 out of those 4 who thought you were good enough. That means for every 10 emails that you send, 10 coaches that you contact, you should get 1 positive response. Whether that's a response or a follow on social media, or they contact your coach, some form of interest. Okay, maybe even a watch list, which you wouldn't even know that they put you on. But 1 out of 10. 1 response is not going to move your recruiting process forward in any meaningful way. So if all of those numbers stay the same, you don't improve any of those numbers, they stay the same, and all you do is simply 10x the number of coaches that you contact, you 10x your replies. So you take the 10 schools you contacted, multiply it by 10, that gives you 100. You take the 1 response you got, you multiply it by 10, and that gives you 10 responses. Wouldn't you be pretty excited about 10 schools showing interest in your kid right now? Okay, cool. So the first reason why you need 100 is because it's a math game. You have to play the numbers game. And so we need to contact 100 schools. Now, there are other reasons to contact 100 schools as well. Number 2, the reason why, is because the schools that you do start talking to are going to ask you who else you are talking to. Like, when you start talking to someone, they're going to say, hey, awesome, yeah, we really liked your video. We think you look great. Like, what other schools are you talking to? And if you say nobody, because you only contacted 10 schools and only 1 of them replied, and you say nobody, that coach is going to be like, well, why not? If the player was a good player, wouldn't they be talking to a whole bunch of schools? I don't really understand. And now there's doubt in that coach's mind, and they're like, I don't know if this is the player for me. And now you work so hard to get that one school interested, and now they're about to leave because you don't have any leverage there, right? And so we can't play that game. We need to generate as much interest as we possibly can, and then we'll filter down from that interest. So you start wide, generate as much interest as you can, and then you can start doing research on the schools that have shown interest to decide whether it's a school that your kid is genuinely interested in or not. right? And so when you're talking to your kid, I'll give you some advice on this because I know that if you go to your kid and you say, we're going to go contact 100 schools, like your kid may or may not be super excited about that. Sorry, there's a motorcycle outside. But your kid may or may not be super excited about going and contacting 100 schools, right? Here's how you pitch it to them. You ready? You say this. You say, hey, listen, if we only go contact 10 schools and your favorite school responds, right? Stanford or Vanderbilt or whoever your favorite school is, they're going to say, who else are you talking to? And hey, if we tell them, nobody because we didn't contact any other schools, we're going to miss out on Stanford or Vanderbilt, right? We're going to miss out on them. So here's what I think we should do. Let's go contact like 100 schools. We'll generate some other interest and we can use that interest to make your favorite schools become more interested. You don't really have to go there, right? To all these other schools. And the kid will be like, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Now, you as the parent, you and I both know that there are probably schools out there in that batch that would actually be a really good fit for your kid. And you just don't really know about them. And the kid doesn't know about them. And so we're still accomplishing getting interest from those schools and making progress, but we're what I call Trojan horsing your kid. We're telling them that it's because we're going to get the top schools interested, but really what we're doing, and sure, that is part of it, but we're also building safety net and backup plan of like generating more interest from schools, okay? So I could just keep going on and on about the reason why we have to have 100 schools, but you asked for the game plan. That's why you're here. And so I'm telling you that step number 2 is to put 100 schools on a target list. Okay. Now, once you have those 100 schools, the next step, step number 3, is to email them. Okay. Now, you are going to email them the video that you put together in step 1, right? Because that is going to be your evidence. So you must go and contact those schools. They are not going to magically stumble across you. It's not going to happen unless your kid is a top 5% player in the country, and they're probably not because you would not need to watch this video right now. You would have more interest than you know what to do with by doing absolutely nothing. And so if that isn't happening, it means your kid is not a top 5% player in the country, and that's okay. You can still generate awesome opportunities for your kid. You just need to be proactive about it. And so you are going to go contact those 100 schools with emails. Okay. Now, the reason that we use email and not social media, and by the way, I recommend using social media. Like the best thing you could do is email college coaches and post on social media. But if you had to choose between the two, I recommend email. I say that for a number of reasons. The first reason is because not all coaches are on social media, but every single coach has an email address. So if you try to go contact them on social media, you're already shrinking your pool of coaches that you can contact simply by where you are trying to contact them. I just want to go where all the coaches are, and every single coach has an email address. The other thing is you don't know when a coach is on social media and they have Twitter and they have Instagram or X or whatever you want to call it. They have Twitter and Instagram. You don't know which one they're more active on, which one they like to recruit off of. And so now it gets a little messy. You're like, well, which one do I contact? I don't know, right? It's like, no. Just focus on email for now. And the other thing is like we focus on email personally, like D1 scholarship, because we can automate the process of sending emails to college coaches. So when we say, hey, we're going to go contact 100 coaches, like we don't manually send 100 emails. We press start and it sends all of those out. That's what we show our clients how to do. That's why we get the results that we do. So like that is also a reason why we focus on email, is because we can automate that process. I can't do that on social media if Instagram or Twitter catches us automating that process on social media. They will ban the account so fast. And so we can't do that. And so that's just yet another reason why we focus on email. Okay. So step number 1, you're going to gather as much evidence as you possibly can that your kid is a good player. If it's a skill-based sport, it's video. If it's a time-based sport, it's stats. Step number 2, you're going to put 100 schools on a target list for all the reasons that we talked about. Then step number 3 is that you're going to email those schools on the list of 100, right? You're going to email each one of those schools, pointing them back to the video that you took in step 1. And then step number 4, I'm going to include this little bonus step. Okay. So already, if you just do those first 3 things, like you're going to be in a much better position than like 95% of people. Okay. But there is a bonus step number 4, and bonus step number 4 is that when a coach follows you on social media, you must message them. So I'm going to give you a little hint here, which is that college coaches may not be ready to respond to your kid's email. That is a committal move. It's sort of like in dating. If you went on a first date with someone and then immediately you wanted to be official and boyfriend and girlfriend, right? And have those labels like from the very first date. Does it happen sometimes? Sure. Is it very committal? Yes, it is. And a lot of people aren't ready to take that step and they're like, hey, I just want to go get coffee again, or like, I want to go grab dinner again, or go see a movie, right? And so like that would be more conversations that have to take place in order for them to come to that point where they're ready to do that. The same thing is true in recruiting, right? Recruiting and dating are very similar. I could make a whole video, in fact, I might do that, about how recruiting and dating are like almost identical. And so what this means for you is that it's very committal for a college coach to reply to an email and express interest in a kid. And not every coach is gonna be ready to do that. And so what might they do instead? They might go follow you on social media. They might go to your Twitter account and just follow the kid, because now they'll get to stay up to date on the kid because they watched the video and they're like, this kid's worth like watching and like keeping around. I'm just not ready to respond to them yet. Okay, cool. By having social media, we keep them in our ecosystem, which is one step further than not having any contact with them whatsoever, right? And so when they follow you on social media, you must contact them. Again, thank you for following me, right? Here's who I am. Here's my video. You must contact them again, because when you go contact those 100 schools, majority of them are not going to respond. And there are going to be quite a few of them who are going to follow you on social media. And if you don't contact them, you are wasting that follow. All the work that you put in to contact those coaches, you've just wasted that. Don't do that. So step number 4 would be contacting coaches when they follow you. I'll also say just being active on social media, like one post a week or something like that, is just going to leave your account active, right? It'll just keep coaches updated on what's going on. They'll see that you're active on there. It's just a good thing to do, okay? So step 1, gather as much evidence as you possibly can, put it somewhere public like a YouTube channel. Step 2, make a target list of 100 schools. The other thing that I didn't mention about that target list that I absolutely should have is that that target list should contain multiple divisions. It should not just be Division 1. It should be Division 1, Division 2, Division 3, NAI, JUCO, or if you're like Jack, we're not interested in D2 schools because we're looking for super high academic schools. Fine, then go D1 and D3. But you shouldn't have just one division on there. You are giving yourself such a narrow window of success, and you're likely not to make it. And so you should have multiple different divisions on there, which, by the way, is talent evaluation. I get asked all the time, and now I'm sort of going on a tangent, but I think this is still applicable, and I think that if you're feeling lost in college recruiting, which presumably is why you're watching this video, then you probably have this question, which is like, I don't even really know how good my kid is. Like, how do you know? And then people come to me and they're like, Jack, can you evaluate our kid? Or they go to some other third-party person. They're like, can you evaluate them? And what I will tell you is that no one's opinion matters besides college coaches. Your high school coach, your travel or club coach, my opinion, your opinion as the parent, like none of those opinions matter. The only opinion that matters is that of college coaches. And every coach is going to have a different opinion. For me personally, when I was in the recruiting process, I had Virginia Tech and Mississippi State watching me in the same game. And Mississippi State is a significantly better program than Virginia Tech in my sport. And so they were both watching the same game. And after that game, the Virginia Tech coach, who is the worst not as good as Mississippi State, told me that I was not good enough to play at their school, and Mississippi State gave me a full ride to go play there. Both coaches watching the exact same game. And you go, how is that possible? Because coaches see different things. It's subjective. So if you want to know talent evaluation, how good your kid actually is, you have to ask college coaches, meaning you need to go contact schools at every level, and then based on the responses that you get, you'll know how good your kid is. If you get a bunch of D1 responses, it's extremely likely that your kid is a D1 talent. If you don't, then they might not be a D1 talent, but at least now you know, and you can go focus the rest of your efforts on other divisions that are actually going to respond to you. And so when we talk about those 100 schools, they should be multiple different divisions. Okay, once you have the 100 schools, you're contacting them via email. You're pointing them back to the video that you took in step 1. Step 4, you are responding to coaches who follow you on social media, right? You're reaching back out to them to try to ignite that relationship. They're in your ecosystem. You want to make the most of that. And you're maybe posting like once a week on social media just to keep coaches updated with what's going on with you. If you do those 4 things, you are already light years ahead of most people. The problem is that most people don't do those things because they're hard. Simple fact. It's hard to go get 50 videos and post them on YouTube and organize them well and title them and like edit them, cut them up. I know. Trust me. I've done this myself. We do this for clients. Like, I know how hard it is. Okay. But it makes a difference. I know how hard it is to go get 100 schools that you're interested in. I know how hard it is to go contact those 100 schools. By the way, you'll get more responses if you send follow-ups to the schools that you contact, not just initial emails. But of course, that means if there's 100 schools, if you send 1 email to each of them, that's 100 emails. That's already a lot. If you send 2 or 3, you're talking about 200 to 300 emails. I know that that's a lot of work, but guess what? That's also how you get the best results. The results that you see us post on like social media, it's not because we sent 40 emails to college coaches. That's not what happened. We went and contacted hundreds of coaches and sent multiple follow-ups to all of them. That's how we got those responses, right? Now, we automate the process of doing that. Like, we're not manually sending those. That's part of the advantage of working with us. But like, that is how that is happening. I know that it's hard to do these things. I get that. But you came here because you wanted a game plan that works. This game plan works. It does. You could ignore every other thing that you have heard about college recruiting from like every other person out there who claims to be a guru to know what they're talking about. You can just ignore all of that and just do what I told you to do in this video, and you will already be light years ahead of where you are right now, which is the goal. Now, if you are the parent of a high school athlete, and this sounds overwhelming to you, and you want us to help you take some of that work off your plate and help you get awesome results and guide you through the process, then I'll leave a link in the description. You can book a call with us and we'll walk you through what we do. But otherwise, I hope this video has been helpful, and I'll see you guys next time.